Hi, everyone. Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. We're on a mission to help business leaders achieve great results through human-centered strategy. In the Fireside Chat series, we're showcasing how leaders unite strategic and human thinking and leadership to make change. And right now, we're excited to be chatting with Tracy Harrison, founder and lead instructor at the School of Applied Functional Medicine. I'm personally very excited to have Tracy here as a major health aficionado. Tracy, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Lisa, Dan, it's great to be here.
Tracy, could you tell us, tell our audience a little bit about functional medicine? What is it that your school does?
Sure. So first of all, we are a virtual school. Everything we offer is online. So our students hail from, at present, about 60 countries around the world. All sorts of different types of healthcare practitioners, from physicians and nurse practitioners to nutritionists and physical therapists and psychiatrists and midwives and pharmacists, and a rich diversity of healthcare practitioners. But what we offer is part of advanced training. After an individual is already licensed and in clinical practice, we're bringing them clinical and technical education to advance their skills. And for many of our students, whether their prior training is in conventional medicine or integrative medicine, or either naturopathy and various modalities of alternative medicine, we teach them to add functional medicine. And to your point, there's a lot of confusion about what that is. It's becoming a very hot topic, featured quite a bit increasingly in online media. But functional medicine is ultimately about trying to help individuals to actually get to the root cause of their disease, so that they can actually reverse it and return to a sustainable state of wellness, rather than just managing the disease or trying to minimize the effects of it by treating symptoms. So it's a rich study of biochemistry and physiology in terms of not just understanding how do we get the diagnosis, but how through multiple interactive factors that a person's natural state of health and vitality fail, and then how do we actually reverse those root causes so that they naturally find wellness again.
And in so many cases, we may have been unwell for so long that we don't appreciate how much vibrance is actually possible, right?
Absolutely, Dan. In fact, I think one of the things that functional medicine best teaches is that so often there is dysfunction, imbalance, or blockage in human physiology for not just months, but even years, maybe even decades, before it becomes severe enough to be diagnosable by conventional standards. And people become so sort of maladapted to feeling not so good, that it becomes their normal. And we're waiting for essentially a health crisis before we do anything about it. But there is a very real opportunity to engage earlier in a preventive mode or in a remission mode before the dysfunction becomes sort of pathological in its own right. And I love teaching healthcare practitioners how to access this in their clinical practice, because it helps them to better achieve the calling for being part of healing that I think originally drew them to medicine in the first place.
I love that. I love that one of the things that you're achieving is not just making people healthier, but bonding with physicians in a way that ties them back to what is wellness all about? What is health all about? I feel like you're changing the entire landscape of how we view wellness and health.
Yeah, thanks. It's really, I have a deep passion and empathy for practitioners. It can be really challenging, especially here in the States, to be a healthcare practitioner these days, especially in managed care. I think people get frustrated with a burned out pace of managed care, where you get to spend 10 or 12 minutes with a patient. You don't really have time to get to know them. And it's a lot of prescription pad, hopefully holding disease at bay to avoid surgery. But I think most healthcare practitioners are empathetic, very intelligent, driven, committed individuals who want to be a part of actual healing, actually not just helping people to manage a disease, but to reclaim true vitality. And so in that way, I think we bring people back to the satisfaction they were drawn to their careers for in the first place.
It's almost a part of healing in itself, right? There's healing for patients. And patients get disconnected from their bodies, who they truly are. Practitioners can as well.
Oh, yes. Huge, huge. In fact, we talk often about the disease epidemics that occur internal to the healthcare practitioner community, right? The stress, just in terms of talk about making disease promoting lifestyle changes. All healthcare practitioners can fall prey to that. It's an incredibly demanding field where you're asked to deal with our most valuable asset, right? Our health, our vitality, our life, our survival. And we're asked to do that in very stressful circumstances with really limited resources. It's very demanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Backing up just a second, I'm curious what sparked your interest in this mission in the first place? Why is this your cause?
That's a great question. I'm a scientist by background. I'm a chemist as a first calling. And I had a long, successful career in corporate high tech. I was actually in the semiconductor industry for 17 years, which was very satisfying. I think I had 7 or 8 roles in 17 years, technical, organizational, financial. I negotiated joint ventures for a while. So it was really satisfying. But what I've always had a deep passion for is understanding systems, and especially very complex systems that have many multi-factorial interdependent variables. And I think when you bring a systems engineering and true scientific inquiry to the human body, we start to realize some truths that really aren't emphasized very much in today's medical education. In particular, just about the interconnectedness of all things in the body. We teach medicine in separate specialties, which makes perfect sense if you're going to have, for example, a surgical specialty. You really want to hone in on a certain set of anatomy or physiology. But if you're trying to perfect the functioning of the overall system, we must always consider that what happens in the gut, for example, affects the brain, and what happens in the liver affects the joints. And what happens in the mouth affects the immune system. So every truly astute physician must be an expert generalist in terms of being able to understand how all of these systems play off of each other, and then also how our lifestyle choices are affecting normal biochemical and physiological functioning. And so I've always been fascinated with systems. I had a wonderful ride in the corporate world, but I quit at the pinnacle of my career pretty much because I was bored. At some point, you realize you're just making more money and collecting more experiences. But I wanted to be a beginner again. I wanted to be a learner, to steep myself in a foundational science again. So I went back to school to study nutrition and biochemistry. And got turned on to functional medicine via a colleague. And I never intended actually to build a career in this space, but I ended up setting up my own practice to give people nutritional guidance to reverse disease. And it was amazing what is possible in terms of hypertension, chronic asthma, type 2 diabetes. These things are reversible. And if we make the right recommendations and really support people with sustainable lifestyle change, it's amazing what we can do. And so, no drugs needed, no acute intervention needed. And when people get really inspired and educated and empowered about how their choices matter, they're much more likely to sustain them because they make sense, right? Not because of compliance and they're afraid, but because we've allowed them to take back their health and see how their choices are changing their day-to-day experience. So it was really my curiosity about learning about systems, and the more I explored, the more fascinated I became. But when I went and got all of my functional medicine training, I ended up creating a school a few years later to offer what was missing in my own training. Because there was a lot of science out there about functional medicine. And I think most healthcare practitioners would be fascinated to learn just how much published peer-reviewed clinical research validates the principles of functional medicine. It's just not the kind of research that gets headlines, because publicity is about revenue. And if you can't patent something or protect it in the market, not a lot of people are going to promote eating more vegetables or getting more sleep, these kinds of things. And so there's a massive amount of research out there that just doesn't see a lot of bright lights. So I created the School of Applied Functional Medicine because rigorous science was available, but what was missing was devil in the detail clinical know-how in terms of applying the science. How do you actually do that in a way that works? And then lots of complex case practice in order to help people to feel confident doing the work. So plenty of a pedantic experience, but not what I call a real professional support to get people who are already out in clinical practice doing the work.
I love that. I love that you have this journey in which you've always had this love of systems thinking, and you apply that to a corporate setting. You apply that to semiconductors, and then during a time of a curiosity, you now apply that to the human body, and you're almost doing it again, applying it to the whole healthcare system and the education system. It's this common thread, and it's fueled by this curiosity. I love it.
Yeah, the science of the human body is amazing. Lisa, you and I were speaking of this earlier. I think we have such a increasingly unfortunate belief that the human body is somehow vulnerable, not very strong, not very resilient. And there's so many different things that the medical media promotes that can go wrong with the human body, right? All these different diagnoses and codes and indictments. And there's a lot of heaviness and fear and negativity associated with that. But when you actually study physiology and biochemistry, the human body is incredibly strong and resilient. And so often what people in our practices are struggling with is not the human body being broken or running awry or being weak, but rather our making choices that naturally trigger the body to respond in a way that over time, when chronically perpetuated, creates disease. It's a natural response of the human body. It's not an error. And so if we change the input to the system, that is our choices, we get a different output of the system, which is our body's behavior and our physiological functioning. And it's really empowering for patients to learn about this, because I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of sense of my health is out of my control. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to fall. It's only a matter of time. I get what my parents had. I just know I'm going to be sick and debilitated from this thing, and no one can do anything for me. It's just a matter of time. It's a given. And not only does this kind of language set up a nocebo effect, but I think it's really creating fear in all sorts of populations in our practices.
So important, the changes that you're making. I would love to shift gears for a sec and just discuss a little bit the school that you currently run. You mentioned that you have people from 60 different countries. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of who's on your team? What does this even look like? What's the business here?
Sure. So we currently have a team of about just short of 60 people. Everybody works virtually. And so it's a really wonderful opportunity to take advantage of all the amazing technologies out there. And certainly in the global pandemic environment, it's been a real a blessing and a bonus, because there were no hiccups for us at all in terms of being able to work virtually And we've needed to do that from the very beginning to support a global community with individuals wanting to take advantage of education on their own timetable, obviously with all the time zones around the world. But since all of our students are working professionals, they want to experience content first thing in the morning, late at evening, on the weekends, during lunch hours, right? Whenever is convenient for them. So we're all virtual. And we have a mixture of technical experts that are involved in developing curriculum and supporting our practitioner students with Q&A and case practice, case consultation, this type of thing. And then we have a pretty significant operations team, which is doing program administration, facilitating media and technology, as well as all of our online marketing. So it's really wonderful to have a virtual team, and one that is also quite international. I think it's probably 2/3 of our team are individuals who have also studied at the school, who are very passionate about what we teach and what we offer.
I love that when you transition from, your corporate job to, running the school, not only did you completely change topic area and mission, but you also have embraced this completely flexible, international, human-centric way of leadership and running a company. Which, when did you start the school?
In 2011.
So that was before virtual was even the hot thing to do, and you got into it really early on. That's so forward looking.
Yeah. 2011, my adventure into functional medicine really began in 2007. And like I said, it was an opportunity to explore and take advantage of what was available, but quickly became apparent that there was a lot missing. So I really think this whole pandemic experience as well has helped a lot of companies to maybe begrudgingly, but I think quite fortunately, see what's possible in terms of technology and online business, working virtually, this type of thing. And while I think in-person engagement is so important, I think we're just now starting to further explore taking businesses into virtual spaces in unexpected and surprising and really productive ways.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. I think people are struck by how much connection they can actually have virtually, right? We all have this fear before we take on a big project that's entirely virtual. How could this work? But that fear typically, I think, just stems from the fact that we haven't done it virtually before. And then you realize how easy it is. And then you think, wow, okay, this is great. I'm curious. So virtual is working really well for you guys. What are some new goals? What are some ambitious goals on the horizon for you?
That's a great question. So we are always aiming to grow. I think in terms of as we learn more and more about not just and not just in the sense of numbers, but to our earlier discussion about really bringing the presence of functional medicine to all healthcare modalities and also to as many countries around the world as possible. Because what we've learned is that the science of functional medicine is consistent, but the particulars of the way you would want to recommend it in a given culture or community are going to vary, right? People have different socio-cultural practices and limitations. There are different natural and embraced and traditional foods in different cultures, right? Different seasons. There's availability of different labs. There's availability of different self-care practices. So while what I find fascinating, just in terms of, again, understanding the system and the possibilities, is a given science can send us in a lot of creative different directions about making it accessible to people in a rich variety of lifestyles, lifestyle benefits, lifestyle constraints. And so I think the broader we spread our horizons, the richer our curriculum becomes, because we also learn from our students as they give us feedback on, that's not available here. We use this instead. Or this is easy for us because we naturally eat a lot of that, or we naturally have this particular, lifestyle practice. And so that is not only, I think, serving a larger audience and a richer community of healthcare practitioners, but it's also making our curriculum richer. So growth is a big goal. And we're part of also making what we offer as valuable as possible to our students is we already have accreditation from the ACCME for continuing medical education credits, but we're looking to expand that to help our pharmacists, our nutritionists, our chiropractors, right? Greater set of modalities, also be able to get the credit that they need for sustaining their license. And so from an operational viewpoint, we're trying to get a richer diversity of accreditation to add that value. Since that's a requirement for pretty much all medical licenses.
It's almost as if the system, so not only is there the body as a system, there's also the functional medicine system by which people are trained. The more you can integrate knowledge from around the world, the richer the context in which the learning happens, and the richer the context in which the practical, experiential element of your learning is, right? It's really your interest to expand.
Exactly. And, interestingly related to that, Dan, a particular passion for me in terms of specific focus. We've been growing quite a bit, particularly in the world of having more and more students who are really working within the confines of conventional managed care. So in the world of functional medicine, there are a lot of entrepreneurial providers or integrative health providers who are not part of what we call managed care, right? Here in the US, right? Conventional allopathic medical care that can receive insurance reimbursement. And I think integrative medicine has struggled for a long time in terms of being perceived as this separate other, right? So you have to kind of exit managed care to go over here and pay cash to get anything different other than mainstream allopathic medicine. But what we're seeing now is more and more people wanting to take the best of allopathic medicine and merge that with the science and the pearls of functional medicine so that they can pull from both toolboxes. And I'm really passionate about this because entrepreneurial practice is great, sure. And there's all sorts of business models that practitioners can use to change people's lives in doing this work. But if we really want to transform the entire healthcare industry, then we must infiltrate and infuse the existing allopathic managed care approach with the functional medicine approach. And instead of getting into an or and dynamic, it needs to be about and. It needs to be about integration so that we are providing care as much as possible in a better preventive, proactive, reversal type of mode whenever possible. But then we have traditional drugs and surgery and other more acute interventions when necessary. But we're looking at a more effective spectrum of healthcare because by keeping them separate, as I said earlier, we're missing a lot of that upfront opportunity to engage earlier before disease becomes severe enough to be diagnosable. By waiting so long, we're allowing people to suffer when they don't have to, and we're allowing disease processes to get entrenched when they don't have to be.
I think it's so important that rather than pushing against the system, you're looking at the system as collaborators.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's able to accelerate your growth so much faster because now you're moving with the wave.
I think that's a really important pearl for any industry transformation, right? I think we always have to kind of withdraw from the norm to go off to the side and innovate initially. But if you want to have a massive impact in transformative change in any industry, I think we have to get out of a combative mindset. where we're fighting the bastion, right? Well, the problem with that is there's millions of people and billions of dollars caught up in the bastion. And so you're a lot less likely to succeed if you're just fighting or you want to completely ignore the establishment. I believe we have more of an opportunity to, with integrity, work from the place of looking for where can there be that meshing, where can there be that beginning of a commingling, to create a crossover. So it's less about that innovation crevasse, right? Where, you know, the new idea is over here and everybody else is down here and there's this giant scary place in between. I don't think it has to be that way in the majority of industries. I think there's more of an opportunity to facilitate transformation, right? Rather than ignoring the status quo and kind of leaving a lot of debris in the transition.
Such important feedback for anyone that really wants to innovate. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Tracy, something that I noticed is that you're not afraid to think very big. And you're not afraid to act very, very big. There are not many people that I've met that are willing to fundamentally change the entire healthcare industry. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you do, and perhaps tips for other CEOs who want to be comfortable thinking so big? What are the things that you do that help you be such a big thinker and not be afraid, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think, first of all, self-care of the leader is so critically important. And certainly one of the things I learned in the corporate world was just how exhausted leadership tends to be. And when you're exhausted, pretty much all of our thinking is about survival. It's about how do I meet this quarter's goals? How do I, meet the next target? It tends to be very short-sighted, and we get into the space where we're always prioritizing the urgent over the important, and so the important never gets done, and it's just sitting out there waiting to become urgent. And for me, there's two key principles of that. One is, if we take care of ourselves and really make time as leaders for self-care. So for me, that's meditation, it's hiking, it's yoga, it's time playing with my dogs. So I get lots of laughter and, I stay in a uplifted, buoyant space. But I'm also a big believer in the making time to do nothing. I think some of the best inspiration happens when you're just sitting outside, looking at clouds and watching the birds. There's a reason why most people get a lot of epiphanies in the shower, because it may be the one time where you're not actually thinking anything important. It's like the soap, the cloth, the water, right? And so we let our thoughts relax a little bit, and there's actually space for a creative epiphany. And so I think the first thing is we have to create space. And so for me, that's about self-care so that I stay grounded and rested and well-nourished and uplifted, very positive, creating space for that inspiration. And then a huge part of that is making sure that as a leader, we are champion delegators. It's amazing to me how many friends and colleagues I have who run very large organizations, who are still trying to do way too much themselves. And they may have big teams, but unfortunately, their desire for control is completely eliminating their ability to be a visionary and make change, because they're still too trapped in the day-to-day that there's not enough space to contemplate, where do we want to be 5 years from now? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? And if the leader's not doing it, who is doing it? Right? Probably no one. And so I feel as though an awful lot of leaders struggle with the whole, I can delegate the stuff that seems like anybody could do it, right? You delegate most of operations, you delegate administration, you delegate the manufactured side of what you offer. But most leaders have certain things in their business that they stay too involved with from a control perspective. And it gets not only in their way personally, it gets in the way of the entire business in terms of really having a transformative results like exponential growth. And it gets rid of in the way of the possible impact you could have.
I'm curious as we start to come towards the end of our time together, Tracy. I think this is a beautiful sort of last theme for us. I'm curious if you went through a journey yourself of becoming someone as a leader who didn't need as much control, who didn't need as much force. Was this automatic for you? And if you did go through a journey to embrace this style of leadership, what prompted that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I like I said, I got the opportunity to observe a lot in the corporate world, and like anything else, you learn both from observing what works well, and you also learn from the copious examples of things that are not working. And you know, it's a sobering thought when you're a health-minded person, and there's just an abnormal number of people in their 40s and 50s who have heart attacks. Yeah. Right? That should not be okay with us. That should be a really dramatic wake-up call. And just my life experience is that if you really well train people on your team, not just in the what you do, but if your training first starts on why we do what we do. So you make sure there's synergy in your passion, and then you make sure they are fully steeped in and aligned with the values. How do you do this work? Then you basically set goals and get out of the way. Because if you're aligned on the why and you're aligned on the values of the how, then my experience is that if you just set super crisp goals with people, they'll amaze you with their creativity and ingenuity and how they do it. It will just get out of the way. And part of the humility all leaders have to have is the willingness to let your team members be way better at the work than you were in the beginning. And think of that as a triumph, not some kind of loss of face, right? And I think to your point, Dan, I just saw a lot of people not do that back in the corporate world and burn out or get sick. Or even I had a couple of beloved colleagues pass away way too early. I think from just acute stress, you know, burning the candle at both ends and in the middle, right? And just where it's really unnecessary. And it comes from fear. It comes from a need to control. And my professional experience is that the magic in growth doesn't start to happen until the leader gets out of the way of the ingenuity and creativity of your team. And rather than trying to control, you know, all the detailed minutia, we're more responsible for setting the stage, the grounding aspect. You know, what is our why? What are our values? What are our goals? And then get out of the way. I think there's some really intelligent, driven, committed leaders out there who are just not experiencing what's possible because they're not allowing that to flow.
That's incredible. I feel inspired. You know, Tracy, it's funny. At the end of each of our interviews, we usually ask our guests what they did for fun during this pandemic while being, you know, in not the most social situations. And this time I'm sitting here being like, does it make sense to ask Tracy that? Because when she was talking about her actual work, that naturally came out when you said that you love to meditate, hike, hang out with your dogs and laugh. And I think that's such a beautiful testament to your entire kind of leadership and work philosophy, that this like spreading joy and being a human who you take care of while all of this madness is kind of happening around you. I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thanks. The healthcare industry in general could seriously use some more vitamin J, right? Some joy, for sure. Yeah.
On that note, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really inspiring. You know, we mean that when we say it. We don't use that word lightly. So interesting to learn from you. Have little doubt those that watch will learn a ton as well. And so looking forward to following your journey and seeing what comes next.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan, Lisa, for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And thank you for sharing this kind of inspiration in the business world. It's definitely needed.
Thank you.